Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Not Too Comic Book. This being a show where we talk about TV shows that are adaptations of comic books. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Peacemaker. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. First and foremost, obviously, we get finally get hard confirmation on what happened between Peacemaker and his brother. Obviously, with what we've seen so far, you kind of pieced it together, especially after the most recent one, showing his brother, having a seizure and his hands bloody. The circumstances that led there aren't 100% what I thought they were, but it's kind of there. My thought was their dad forced them into a fight, and he didn't think Chris was actually going to do that. But it seems like that is somewhat the case, but it's more like they did it for fun, for shits and giggles. It is a very effed up thing of let's get all our buddies together and we kind of bet on it, and just it's kind of a fun thing. It's it's a way to toughen up his sons, and also it's meant to be a form of entertainment around all his white trash friends. So, at least when it comes to Chris's dad. But the problem is once again, Keith probably had a medical condition, because his dad's probably oh, my son's too tough, because he is the type of dad to be oh, my son don't got nothing pussy some medical conditions, or my son's strong, both my sons are strong. Well, Keith is. He's Chris, because if anyone was going to have a medical condition, he's oh yeah, Chris, that pussy, of course he would, but not my Keith, he's the strong one. And then he's up there yelling at him, it's yeah, you killed your brother. It's who set this up in the first place? Because they're laughing and enjoying it, because it's right, their dad, it's meant to be, because it's probably the only thing that they can do to get their father's love. Casey's all right, do this for me, boys. And they're right, they love their dad and they'll do anything for him. They're young enough and impressionable enough to be right, push comes to shove, he asks you to do something, you'll do it, no matter how jacked up he is, because it's yeah, we're rowdy boys, we're gonna do whatever we want to. It's just at that time, I think it's because, and I think this plays into the episodes, he didn't recognize how much of a piece of shit his dad is, because he's always loved his dad, and he tried to always get his dad's love and affection, even though he never was going to. And so he always strives so hard, so that's why he is kind of the piece of shit that he is, because his dad's a humongous piece of shit. So all the while, obviously, he's thinking about all this while, his world is collapsing, because, Locke is yep, fine, Peacemaker, that's the number one thing. And I love immediately, Peacemaker's I don't have a diary. If I was going to, later on, he's if I had a diary, I'd be writing in a journal or something at best, And he's yeah, knowing me, do you really think that journal was me? And John was honestly, no, but having gotten to know you a little bit, it is kind of in the realm of possibility. He's yeah, but I probably would do something, but not like that. But I love that he immediately knew it was Adebayo that did it. And I was oh, that's interesting. But I'm well, I guess it makes sense. He's probably I've been in that home enough that well, to be fair, the only other person that's been alone in my house recently was Adebayo, because the last time anyone else was at my house, I was with Vigilante. At no point in time did he ever was alone long enough for that to happen. Two, other than that, was when the entire crew came and got me in the first episode, but we kind of all left. I could understand him kind of piecing that together. I was really surprised by Hardcourt figuring it out, but I think it's probably just kind of a thing of, well, she was already suspicious of Adebayo the entire time, and it's just this popping up out of nowhere and now making Peacemaker take the fall for everything. It's cool, Waller sent you to do this, didn't? Because she knew that this was some you spend enough time under Waller's foot, what her tactics are, and this screamed an Amanda Waller tactic. Because when it comes to all this too, there's also the element of Adebayo, when they referenced the diary last episode, she was fuck, and Burns what, you know something about it? She's what, no? So that probably just added more suspicion to it. But obviously Harcourt was upset, because it's no, we're supposed to be a team, especially because she opened up a lot more to this squad. It's oh, we're a team, we're actually good. She opened up a lot more because of the squad, and she's actually changed her mind on Peacemaker. She sees a different side of him, and so to find out one of them betrayed him, it stings even more. And then to find out, wait, you're Amanda Waller's daughter, it's yeah, I wasn't even about this, and this is how just circumstances we find ourselves in. and it's just like, she's like, I needed money. My mom offered me a job. She apparently had said no and time again, but this was just kind of like she was backed into a corner at this time and just like needed the money. And her mom probably never really told her the ins and outs of what she was going to get up to. But I love that Mern comes in and it's like, right, she's Amanda Waller. Yeah, Amanda Waller's daughter. I know. It's like, you do? It's like, yeah, you think I don't do a good enough job checking on everyone? I was like, oh, so you've known the entire time. It's like, yeah, she's the one, yeah, that plays Peacemaker, the diary on Peacemaker. It's like, honestly, the smart thing would have, like, it makes sense putting it all on Chris, because I even love that Adebayo tries to, like, backtrack it a little bit, even though she's gotten to know Chris more. She's like, oh, he's this and that, because she's trying to make herself feel better about it, because in that moment, she did feel guilty, but I think she tried to justify it, but like, you know, he was always meant to be the fall guy. This is always going to meant to point back to him, because he is very befitting of who he is, because, you know, she came in and just being like, oh, he's an asshole, but even she kind of started being like, oh, maybe he's not that bad of a guy, and now thinking like, you know, she's trying to get out of all this, so she's trying to be like, you know what, I don't care, he's a bad guy, like, it's the only way, it's her way of trying to like, alright, I'm clean of it, like, I'm done with all this, because she's planning on leaving with Kia. But I even love Mern being like, yeah, that's kind of the smart play, it makes sense. Sadly, she didn't wait until the job was actually done before she did that, but okay, Mern was kind of okay with it, just like, as long as she waited till after we were done stopping this alien invasion, but sure, whatever. It's like, couldn't your mom have told you to do that? Like, why'd your mom let you do it? To be fair, I guess she's aware of some of the ins and outs of all of this, but not enough to really see. I don't know, because I feel like that's a bit, like, a big picture thing would have been, I guess the point was, no one was supposed to find it until after the fact. They didn't know, like, John was, I mean, it's all John's fault because he set this up by putting, Peacemaker's dad in jail. He ends up ratting out his son, and obviously that led to Sophie, like, ended up looking into things deeper, so it's all on him. Because I was about to say, like, no, she probably planned for, like, yes, when it's all said and done, they would eventually trace it all back to Peacemaker. Could it be like, oh, let's, leave or tip or something and point them in the direction of Peacemaker with all of this, but they found the diary way sooner than they were supposed to. Like, she was supposed to plan it for a long time, but still, it wasn't probably supposed to be found until it was all said and done, so... I'd also skipped over it too, but like, yeah, Judo Master, I love that. It's like, wait, where's Judo Master? And then Vigilante was like, wait, was he supposed to be here? So it's like, oh, I love he just casually, last time you took him down, shot in the chest, he was strapped back down, and somehow he managed to get out again. Which I love that whole scene when he beats up those guys who are talking mad shit to him and stuff. I love the guys, they're referencing Boondock Saints. I love it. I like legitimately really like that movie. I really like the sequel. I've seen the first one more times than I have the sequel. I know they're supposed to be working on a third one. I think they are. I don't know. I really like those movies. Tangents and all that aside, I do love that Judo Master puts him into place afterwards. I'm like, yeah, talk shit, get hit. And I love that the store owner on the inside, after he sees Judo Master kick their asses, he kind of gives them a thumbs up and he's like, yeah. I'm like, yeah. But when it was all said and done, though, circling back, I thought it was interesting, the conversation between Adebayo and Hardcore, because it's just kind of like, oh, you want to kill an innocent man, and now you're judging me for all the stuff I did with this whole Peacemaker thing, which I think is interesting. It's like, she's like, oh, you're supposed to, like, you know, supposed to, like, stay by, like, you're supposed to, like, have the backs of the people beside you and stuff like that. And Hardcore was like, yes, that's the point of being a part of a team. But for her, it's like, it's kind of like, yeah, but because of the mentality like that, you kind of treat people like they're just a means to an end. Of like, yeah, that guy who's begging for his life. Thing is, if you didn't kill him, he probably would have killed you, given a chance. I don't know. But it'd also be like, whoa, the fact is that that's my perspective on it. I don't know. I don't know. I wouldn't want to be in that situation. I'd probably be knowing who I am, I'd be the Adebayo in that situation. I wouldn't be the Hardcore being like, yeah, got to make the tough decisions and stuff. But I mean, it's also because Adebayo took her advice, and I think that's what kind of let things spiral to what they were, like her trying to make the hard decisions and such. But nevertheless, while they're dealing with this, they're on their way. Vigilante John, who decided to tag along, Eagly and Vigilante. I said John. Yeah, John, Peacemaker, Vigilante, and Eagly are all going off dealing with the cow situation before the cops arrive for them. and get attacked by, because someone had referenced, I was watching something and someone referenced like a white dragon suit looking a lot very Iron Mask. I don't know why it kind of shot me. I'm like, oh, it's flying. I'm like, oh, there's really very Iron Man-esque. But to be fair, it's also the thing of, okay, but it's like, right, he is the one who made all of Peacemaker's helmets, so like he has some technological know-how. Even racist pieces of crap can be smart too, sadly. So yeah, he flew in, and taking no prisoners, about to blast his son with like some energy attacks. And Vigilante, just, I love that line, and the theme of the episode, just like, there's never a wrong time to rock. Threw down the grenade. He got super jacked up. I'm like, man, oh man, would you? I bet you do give anything to be Vigilante from the Arrowverse. Because this is something I didn't know until like I'd looked it up prior. Because I didn't include it in my like trailer discussion or whatever for, or might not even been a trailer discussion. It might have been an early like before like we got any footage from the show. But my experience with Vigilante was Arrow, where in Arrow he has Vigilante, which is a different character, even though there was already an Adrian Chase. You know, if you've seen Arrow, you know what I'm talking about. But that version of Vigilante having a healing factor isn't typical to the character. That's something they did specifically for Arrow. So I was like, okay, so that was interesting. I was like, you probably want to be that Arrow version of Vigilante in this moment, because he got super jacked up. Also, Peacemaker having to get rid of all of his helmets. Well, at least he had the one on because, but it's like that's how his dad tracks him. It makes you wonder, like, oh, what was the purpose of that to begin with? Was it to always know exactly where his son was, or what? It couldn't have been for the purposes of like, oh, I want to know where you are, but maybe like at one point in time he acted as his dad's backup or something. I mean, his dad acted as his backup or his support. So knowing exactly where he was, I don't know. Maybe it made it easier to keep track of the helmets in general, like in case his son ever did something stupid, like just take one of the helmets, do whatever he wants to, that maybe he could always track him down, like, oh, I know exactly where you are because I can find the helmets. Whatever the case may be. I love the whole tying it to a raccoon thing, and he's like, oh, those things are vicious, and John's like, yeah, who would have guessed, like, grabbing a wild raccoon would end with your face get jacked up like that. I do like that Vigilante tried the whole thing of, yeah, like, oh, this, wounded in the passenger seat, turning up the music. And he's like, what are you doing? It's never a wrong time to rock. He's like, and even Peacemaker being like, yes, dude, there is a wrong time to rock, and that's this time. So, but also he's the one that kept all the helmets and stuff. And it's like, no, he was like, yeah, I thought they were valuable, so I didn't want to get rid of them. I also love his justification why he, like, gets like his butt out, because he's like, right, he's like, I can't pee if something's touching my butt. I love that that's his justification for it. I thought that whole sequence, I loved it. Like, obviously, like, I love that John came in clutch when he, like, lit up everyone. I'm like, he was already feeling himself because of the Judo Master thing. Oh, this is his next 15 minutes of fame. Like, oh yeah, I killed a whole bunch of, like, neo-Nazi racist pieces of crap. Like, I gunned them all down. I was a superstar, so. But, poor Eagly got knocked back by, White Dragon, and so did Chris, and he's just like, oh yeah, you killed your brother. I knew you were basically an issue the moment, like, you were listening to that rock music, which I'm like, your other son was listening to it too. But obviously it's just like, he hated everything about Chris. He's like, I knew I should have snuffed you out basically the moment you were born. You were this and that. I'm gonna kill you in the name of the Lord type of thing. Luckily Vigilante came, like, struck him in between the linings of, like, the suit, so that it ends up shutting down. And Chris starts beating the ever living shit out of him. He's like, no, this is your fault. You are, like, I am a piece of shit for ever listening to you. You're the reason why my brother's dead. And he's like, oh, you hit like a girl. And then Chris pulls the gun on me. Oh, he was like, oh, you'll never do it. You'll never basically get away from me. And then, because he didn't think he had it in him, and Chris pulls the trigger. And it's like, which I think is interesting to kind of be on that other end of things. I don't know if this is the purpose of it, but it's not the same thing, but it kind of makes me feel like similar to like the him versus Rick Flag, but also him versus Bloodsport thing. It almost seemed like a parallel to that. I don't know if that's just me reaching and looking too much into thinking too much about that. But yeah, him pulling the trigger, him kind of being a good guy fully in this instance. And I love that he starts crying and like I love Vigilante's like, man, this is a weird time to do your face muscle. He's crying, you asshole. He's like, oh, okay. And he comes over and leans over. He's kind of tapping. He's like, there you go. Like, gentle, like, supportive, like, pat. Like, I forgot what he said. He was basically like, oh, yeah, like, gentle touching or something like that. And John was like, stop, that's creepy. He's like, right, sorry. It's just like, can't read the mood. I don't know why, too. It's just like the way they had, like, because of the suit, like, Robert Patrick is, like, laying there and, like, his head is lifted up. So you can literally, not only are you seeing the blood pooling, you can see it drip from the back of his head. I feel like most things don't do that. They'll just be like, I guess just because of the suit and everything, he's lifted up a little bit so you can see that. But typically, you just see, like, oh, the head's there, and then just, like, the blood pulling. It's like, you can literally see the blood pouring out of his head from the wound. It's crazy. I don't know, it's just, from a, like, just, I was like, oh, from just a visual standpoint, I was like, oh, I don't see many things do that like that. I just thought that was interesting. So, regardless of, man, my dad was a terrible person. I needed to stop him. I should have stopped him a long time ago. He's even said, I should have killed you in your sleep. But it's like, yikes. It's like, that still doesn't make it any easier. Like, no matter how much of a piece of crap your dad is, he's still your dad, you know? Hell, he even talked about it later on that, like, other than Eagly, like, the only other person that ever liked him was Keith, you know? So it's just heartbreaking. Especially because, like, you know, he carried that guilt with him, being like, this is my fault. But it's like, and once again, what did he always do? He strived to, he felt like he needed his dad's forgiveness, so he always tried to strive to be what his dad wanted him to be. I'm going to be the best version of myself. I'm going to be so good that you'd be proud of me, Dad. It's like that he wanted, like, his dad's acceptance and praise. Then we had the other side of things where Myrn sacrifices himself, which was heartbreaking. And I think it is interesting to speak, like, because the moment it's like she puts Myrn down without a second, and I was like, you don't know he's a butterfly. I was like, that's interesting. She only knows the others are butterflies because she's like, oh, I know I affected all of you. So it's interesting that they can't recognize that in each other. So like the moment Myrn dies and the butterfly comes out, she's like, wait, it's you? Huh, and she crushes him in her hand, which the one inside Larry's like, oh my god, you killed him. It's like, yeah, he's a warrior. He should have been on our side, but he chose differently. Let's get out of here. Let's protect the cow, which I think is so fascinating. It was like, just knowing that they can't recognize each other in one another. But it is also sad to know, I wasn't, I don't know why, I just kind of assumed, like, I mean, it's like, what, it's just kind of like the Suicide Squad. Not everyone made it out of that. Even the ones you're kind of like, oh, these people probably aren't going to make it, and then, like, even amongst the final few, like, main cast that you follow for most of the movie, I didn't see Rick Flag dying. Kind of didn't expect Polka Dot Man to, like, bite the dust like that either. Or see the Peacemaker thing happen. I mean, granted, he didn't die, though, so. And Milton. Come on, we can't forget about good old Milton. Remember all the good times with Milton. Oh god, that still cracks me up to think about. Like, yeah, he was there the entire time. I love it. Regardless, poor Myrn, and especially because like Hardcore and Adebayo go into the room and they grab him and touch him, and I'm like, oh, especially because he's in like Hardcore's hand and like he's touching her, and you're like, oh, that's heartbreaking, and he dies in her hand. That sucks. It's like, well, what are we supposed to do without Myrn? And then they get attacked by Judo Master, which we never really got an answer to, like his connection to all this, because he's like, oh, the butterflies aren't what you think they are, which is so interesting because the Queen's all about, the one that's in Golf that he was protecting is all about conquering this planet. But then, like, I don't know, that's so interesting because he's like, the butterflies aren't what you think they are, but they kind of are exactly. Myrn was the only one that wasn't what you thought they, you know, so I'm like, what is that about? We never got because Adebayo shot him before he could say anything, right? So I'm wondering, like, is there more to that? I mean, I want, like, you almost want, at this point, you're like, because at the time I was like, did she do that on purpose? Or was that just her trying to fill the role of like, no, I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing. Like, you know, I got to take the shot because before I didn't take the shot, now I need to take the shot. Or is it just, I'm covering up so you don't know more information? Like, I don't know. Because she kept stuff from her mom, potentially. She could be lying about that. So, I don't know. But I also love that whole sequence really quickly, like Judo Master versus Hardcore, because she's like, oh, last time you're going to sucker punch me, and just like, that was pretty nasty. Like, it got brutal, tossing around, flinging into stuff. Like, those are like some hardcore contact punches and hits. Especially when he kind of got on top of her and started punching him. I'm like, Jesus, dude, no mercy. But it's like, oh, rope-a-dope motherfucker, and then like, Adebayo's like tasing him, so he's knocked out. It is sad when it's all said and done, because like Adebayo's like, yeah, like I hadn't decided what I was gonna do when it came to the whole Mern thing, whether or not I tell my mom. It's kind of a moot point now that he's gone. But we found out, like, what was your previous job? She's like, I ran a dog shelter. It's like, Jesus, how you go from like dog shelter to this? No wonder you're like, I'm crazy. This is too much for me. No wonder you're like that, considering all this going down. Like, of course, this would seem wild to you, going from like, I thought you might have had some like tech side of things, like, but to be fair, like, you probably made sure to have nothing to do with your mom's line of business. But it's like, yeah, like her mom kept asking her over and over again. Her mom always wanted her to be a part of this, you know, because I guess eventually, if she was going to pass the mantle down to anyone, it was always going to be her daughter. So maybe that's the justification for it, but. Obviously, when this was all said and done with destroying the cow and everything, she planned to go back to Kia and just like leave all this behind, because obviously it was like too much for her. Well, she was actually planning on still leaving at that point, but Hardcore is like, but you are good at it. Regardless of anything, you are good at the job, so we need to kind of see this through. You know, if we don't, no one else will. So they meet up with the others. And I love that, like, Vigilante's holding, like, the people hostage. It's like, yeah, a doctor, the nurse, and the male nurse. It's like, well, you could have just said two nurses. It's like, yeah, but you hear nurse, someone's going to imagine female. And he's like, and then, like, why would anyone imagine female nurse, considering we're right here and seeing it? And he's just like, oh, man, it must be sad, like, to wake up every day being a male nurse. And John's like, what? What are you talking about? You're a fucking busboy. He's like, now he knows what I do for a living. Now you've compromised my secret identity. And it's like, right, do we kill these people or not? Because we can't take the chance they know, like, rat us out. And so Hardcore's the one that's like, no, we'll just tie them up. And it's like, right. And then, okay, it's like, right, all right, we'll tape them up, but we need to be careful about it, because like, that way the tape doesn't hurt them the moment it gets ripped off. And John's like, so you care more about the tape than brutally murdering people? And he was like, yeah, of course. It's like, you are all kinds of wrong, dude. And I love that Adebayo ends up seeing that moment with Peacemaker and Eagly, and I think it's so beautiful and touching. And then obviously you got to give it that James Gunn flair of like, yeah, it's beautiful and sentimental, and you got to make it a little jacked up of him being like, oh, I should have never left you with my dad. I should have like left you with some like person I was with, and then the moment I got out of prison, broken up with them. Then I wouldn't even have had to have sex with them. He's like, but then I probably would have, just one more time. I mean, then it wouldn't even been a chore, because I'd been locked up for 4 years, so it would have actually worked out for both of us for us to have sex. We just, please let my buddy be okay. He's the only one that's ever liked me other than my brother Keith. And then Eagly wakes up and hugs him. And Adebayo, who believed it was BS, seeing it. I even love she calls Kia. She's like, I saw an eagle hug a human. It's like, what? With everything going on? It's like, yeah, fuck. I love that's the thing of like, oh, because of all the craziness that's going on, an eagle hugging a human is the big thing of like, holy crap, that's wild. And for her, she looked at it as a miracle, and she's like, right, maybe this is a sign that I need to see this through. This is where I need to be. So everyone's getting locked and loaded. And it's like, right, but how are we going to do this without Mern? Someone else is going to have to take charge. I know John's like, me? Adebayo's like, no, fuck no. Even I'm like, why'd you even put yourself in that position to get shit on like that, John? Why would they be talking about you? Once again, he's feeling himself too much. He's like, oh, obviously I must be a potential person in the runnings because I took down Judo Master and I killed a whole bunch of white supremacists. So like, yeah, I must be the obvious decision. I was like, at first I was like, are you going with Peacemaker? But it's like, no, Hardcore. And it makes sense. So it's like, right. The cow, it's basically, once again, you kill that, you kill their source of food. It's the only thing keeping them alive. They, like, eat and drink on this world, but, like, that is their only sustainable food. Well, no, they breathe our air and they drink the water, but the amber fluid is the only thing that actually sustains them. You kill the cow, we kill them. Which we actually got our look at the cow at the very end of it. It has eyes like a spider. It kind of reminds me of, oh my god. Oh my, I'm blanking on his name now. It's Starfire's pet from Teen Titans Go. the little Silky, I had to look it up because I could not remember it today. It kind of reminds me of Silky a little bit. I don't know whether that's what that's supposed to be or not. It might not be, but it reminds me of Silky, but it has like spider eyes instead. Because like it's the same color as Silky as well too. So I'm like, I wonder, is that what that's supposed to be? Is that supposed to be of like that similar species or no? That's like a spider, like with, at least with the eyes, is what initially came to my mind. But also now, like I said, once I started sitting here thinking about it, like DC universe wise, it kind of reminds me of Silky. But nevertheless, so that's interesting. Got to take that out, and I love it. It's like, all right, let's get locked and loaded. Got to see this through to the end, and I love that the nurses and the doctor are like, all right, let's go too. It's like, no, you're not going with us. You're just going to end up dead. It's like, come on, you don't need the help. It's like, no, you're just going to die. That's why I almost have to expect you to bring them just for them to die in like the first few minutes of the encounter, few seconds of the encounter or something like that. But I love it. It's like, nah, we're just going to tie you up, but we are going to have to commandeer your vehicle. And I love it's like, man, they're not that bad of people. It's like, yeah, and except for that guy in blue. It's like, yeah, he's a fucking mess. But I love that, like, Adebayo tried to, like, make things right between her and Chris. He was like, no, like, you made me think we were part of a team, but you clarified that for me that we aren't, so I can't wait till this is over, and I could get away and never see your dumb face ever again, and she's kind of hurt by it. It's like, yeah, because regardless of it, she feels bad, because it's like, yeah, he was kind of her friend, and for him, it's like, yeah, like, they were kind of friends, because I even love that, God, what was it that Vigilante was saying? He was saying something... Like him and John and Vigilante were having some back and forth, and Vigilante was like, "Oh God, John, I love our little back and forth." He's like, "I mean, it's not as deep as mine and Peacemaker's, but it's still pretty fucking cool." Which I love that. So now it comes down to this. The next episode is the season finale. They're going toe to toe with the butterflies, as well as taking out the cow. We'll see how this all plays out, how it all ends, where the team finds themselves at the end of this. What's Adebayo going to do? Like, what's she going to say to her mom? A lot of questions, and I'm curious to ultimately see how they end up wrapping up the season. I have to look into it. I don't know if there has, at this point in time, been any official word. I know James Gunn has said, like, the chances of a season 2 are pretty good. Because I think it's been well received, and I think HBO Max number-wise, apparently it's potentially good. Once again, I don't think any streamer actually releases their numbers. You just kind of have to go by what they say. But I think, like, James Gunn is like, yeah, it seems pretty likely, or at least it's a good chance there'll be a season 2. So I'm curious how this will end. Will it cliffhanger some stuff, or will it just leave open enough threads for season 2? We'll ultimately just have to wait and see how the season finale wraps up, to kind of, see where maybe a potential season 2 could go anyway. But still, I'm excited to see where this all goes. But really, that's all I want to talk about. To the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.